Did you want one?
No, I'm actually good. Wait a second. Okay, I will take one.
Cheers.
You got a good story.
Okay, white monsters.
White monsters.
Last time we were together, and pretty much every single time that I've seen you, you have a white monster. Like, take me back to when that first started, and is it just like the drink of choice for Castelion now? But take me back to when that first started.
I actually think the drink of choice for Castelion is Celsius. But I've already been hooked on White Monster. But yeah, a friend of mine, I think maybe like 15 years ago, was like, do you want an energy drink? Never had an energy drink in my life before that. At that moment that I tasted my first energy drink, it's basically been a health journey downhill ever since. So
I do feel like even with one sip, I'm like hyped. And I know that it was a big part of your experience at SpaceX in some ways.
Well, you never sleep.
A minor accessory, I should say.
Yeah, you never sleep. So you just keep drinking Monster, and then you're fine. Like, you can wake up and you can have anxiety about what you haven't finished that day, and then you can do it at 3 a.m. It's perfect.
Sounds healthy.
It sounds very healthy.
Okay, let's go all the way back. So prior to Castelion, prior to SpaceX, the ability to be interested in aerospace and rocketry and all of that is especially unique, and you've had such a sort of consistent journey in the sector. Where did it originally start for you?
Straight out of Georgia Tech. I kind of had several like career paths in front of me, and it was really finance, oil and gas, or aerospace. And so finance was intriguing. They had a lot of money, and they were throwing it around to try to recruit. And then it was like very clear, like anybody there would stab you in the neck to make a little bit more money.
Sounds delightful.
Sounds delightful working environment. And being from Georgia, it definitely didn't fit my personality. Oil and gas was interesting, but the sales pitch there was like, hey, you're going to go to Nigeria for 2 years, then you go to an oil rig in the North Sea for 2 years, and then you can move to Houston as the grand reward. And so that was intriguing, but no. And then I had an interview with Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab, known as APL. And everybody would be like, JPL? I'd be like, no, APL.
Okay.
And they'd be like, what are you doing? But they came in, they showed me like this really cool optics lab with just stuff everywhere. Lenses, lasers, cameras, you name it. And then they told me they couldn't tell me what we were doing. So I was like, clearly, this is the career choice. This is it. And so I spent probably years of my life in that optics lab building things.
And did you know at the time that you would potentially go off and start a company of your own, or was that sort of not in the field of view?
Absolutely not. I kind of wish that I had like family that had more entrepreneurial spirit, and I didn't have that in my family. I was already on the leading edge. I ran a lawn care business all through high school and had more liquid cash than nearly anyone I knew.
How did you spend that cash?
Oh, my mom would be disappointed. Let's not go there.
Okay. Next question.
But it really came down to, I didn't know anything about running a business. And so, you got a job, you went to school, you got a job, you worked for someone else, and you would do that like your entire career. That's kind of like what my lived experience was, and everybody I knew did that. And so I didn't, like, you'd read these stories about people starting a business, and it honestly seemed like so foreign, so impossible. How would you do that? Absolutely no clue. So I think there's certain founders that come out of it, even will leave college and immediately start a company. I would have never had the, I'd say, like, confidence to do that. I had to take the hard path through life, which I think is a good analog for everything that I've done. It turns out you could have built a business, putting happy faces and sponges and things like that. But it's like, no, we're going to build a hypersonic missile. So it's always been kind of like the hardest path possible, but doing the right thing. But I think like it took years to kind of feel like I had all the various skill sets necessary to be successful at building a business.
Okay, so you're at Johns Hopkins and you're working in the lab. And at what point do you become familiar with SpaceX? At what point does that come into the picture?
So I went into traditional aerospace like in 2002, right out of Georgia Tech, and that's about the same time that SpaceX was formed. So people knew, like, you knew of SpaceX being in aerospace, but I mean, in general, like, people talked about it negatively, like, what a bunch of yahoos, they don't know what they're doing, blah, 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 which is generally how they treated everybody coming out of school. Like, you learned a certain way of doing things in school, and then they would immediately beat that out of you as like not the correct aerospace way of doing things. And I didn't know much, I had no connection. I didn't know anybody that worked there. I had absolutely no connection at all. But I watched what they were achieving, and then you could just kind of hear this like cognitive dissonance of people being like, they're doing it wrong. I'm like, well, it seems like they're doing it right. And then when they announced they were going to go after reuse, like, again, like new waves of people making fun of them. Like, they can't do it. That's not possible. And it's like, well, it seems like it's possible if you try. So I just watched with kind of like fascination and amusement. In fact, that was one of like I wouldn't say it was necessarily SpaceX that was the driving factor to leave, but I was locked in like the center of, for all of the people in West Coast Aerospace, they'll know, I was locked in the center of like the A8 building on Aerospace's campus in El Segundo in a cube farm by myself that people used to cut through from one hallway to the other. And I'm like reading stories of it was Skybox at the time, launching satellites, Planet launching satellites. And I just felt like, what am I doing here? I want to go out and build. I want to do what they're doing. And so I ended up leaving just because I was frustrated with like the pace of like aerospace and the pace of working in that environment. And so I didn't immediately go to SpaceX. I actually joined some friends that were building an AI company in the mid-teens, which is, sad to say, not what doing AI today would have been. We were actually made fun of for starting an AI company. And
How did your friends convince you to do that at the time?
honestly, it was difficult. I had worked with them, as my career progressed at Johns Hopkins. I went from like engineer to program manager to really doing like BD and sales, because I always just wanted to do I wanted to pick what we worked on. I was always like, when you're the engineer, right? Somebody comes with you, tells you what you're going to work on, and you don't really have any input into that. And I wanted to get to the point that like we could pick and choose like the hard problems that we'd go after. And so I thought that was the program manager, and then it turned out, no, that's actually whoever sold the program. That's what you're going to get to work on. And so I had worked with them on several NASA programs. So they were like the principal investigators to the program, and I had executed on them from both like a BD and a program management standpoint. And when they said they were going to start this business again, it was more like how would you do that? Like it still was like a very foreign concept. And working at APL, I've been there for 12 years at that point. It was such a safe job. Like, this was a job that I could have worked there for 45 years and just retired, and everything would have been fine. So the thought of leaving that, honestly, at the time, I remember just being so nervous and scared that, like, what am I doing? I'm going to take my career and I'm just going to like throw it away 12 years. And now when I look back on that decision, it didn't even make sense. It's like, I can remember how I felt, and now I can't even like relate to that person anymore. Because it's like, if you go off and you start something and it doesn't work out, you'll get promoted. You'll get a better job somewhere else. You can probably go right back to where you left.
Do you ever think about those 12 years? Like, if you were to look back, why was it 12 years and not 10 or 8?
Honestly, I feel like I should have left sooner. But it was like I think, my personality at the time was I liked certainty. And I think that it just felt very secure. Like I had a good position, as well respected. I knew most of the people. It was like, even when I joined, it was like thousands of people there, and I knew almost everyone. It just felt safe, and I liked what I was doing.
Yeah.
It just wasn't until the point that it felt like, hey, like the world's moving on, and you're locked in the top of the A8 cube farm, that I decided like I don't want to do this anymore. I want to go take a shot. So totally fearful, they just said, hey, we need somebody to come over and sell to the government and then run the programs. I honestly hemmed and hawed over that for longer than I should have, but I would just remember the feeling of just being super nervous. And then like the first day you walk into a startup and it's literally like we're like in a co-working space with another startup, and everything's just wild because it's like, what's happening? No clue. You have to figure what's step
You've gotta
two.
make it happen.
You have to go do that,
Yeah.
and you have to decide what step two is. And there's no process, and we have no tools. Like we didn't even have Microsoft Project, because they don't bundle that with Office for whatever reason. So it's just like you had to go figure out how to do everything. And I think for me, I learned that A, I really liked that environment, and B, I was relatively decent at it. And so that was kind of like the first kind of proof point of like, hey, even though this is like a totally foreign concept to running a startup or to being, no, I wasn't like running the startup, to being in a startup, it was like kind of like a confidence builder to say, hey, like this is possible. And I didn't know that about myself at the time, like frankly. And so I think it was one of those kind of eye-opening moments, like you can do this, which is certainly like I'd say like growing up in like South Georgia, just a very foreign experience, like a venture startup from like a kid from South Georgia. It's just like now there's Hermeus in Atlanta, but there's really at the time there was nothing.
Who did you go to for advice back then?
I didn't have anybody go to advice. And I think that was part of the problem. Like I didn't have anybody in my family to kind of like speak to. Like they would always look at me and be in awe of like, we can't believe you're going to do that. How brave. And I didn't really had I think like actually one role model that I did have who was a small business owner. His name Wayne Rogers out in Apple Valley, California. And Wayne, like self-taught genius. He made optical deposition, like sputtering equipment to put coatings on optics. And it's just like he ran a small shop, like nondescript, and he made these machines that supplied like everybody. Like if you wanted to put coatings on lenses, you bought one of his machines. And he was fantastically wealthy from that. And it was just like, it was just a business. He was just like, he always would be like, oh, I could do that. So you come to him with like some problem. He's like, I think I can make a way to figure that out. And he'd go do it. So I always looked up to Wayne as like, wow, that's incredible, Wayne. I don't know how you do this, but I never really saw myself like as could I be in his shoes.
Yeah.
And so like he was one of the few people that I could actually talk to. And even when I talked to him about this, like kind of like a venture-backed startup was so different from a bootstrap small business that even he was kind of like, oh, this isn't really the type of business for me.
Interesting.
So again, like back to like just plowing ahead.
So what year you've spent a couple years with the AI company?
Yeah, it was about like 2.5, 3.
Okay.
Sold to Vista Equity.
Okay.
Which, I mean, that's one of the 3 possible outcomes.
Yep.
So very happy to have that. And then I wanted to get back into aerospace. Like that was always a passion. I always wanted to, be in, to build something and get it into space. And looking around at like, well, what are the companies that are like making it happen? And it was like very obvious it's SpaceX, and I didn't know anybody there. So I applied blind. I had 2 resumes. One was like a very traditional, kind of boring black and white resume, and one was a creative resume with with a photo on it. So I was like, oh, they're probably like a more creative company. So I sent in the creative resume.
At some point, I absolutely need to see some.
Oh, I
photo
have it.
of
I
this.
saved it.
Good.
I was relentlessly made fun of for it for my entire time there. It still comes up, but I did get picked out of a stack of, I believe it was like hundreds and hundreds of resumes.
Worth it then.
So it was worth it, even if it was in a negative light.
Even if it followed you.
Even if it followed me around.
Much longer than you anticipated.
Yeah. Okay. And it was, I came in and I had what I felt was like the absolute worst interview in the world. I literally was sitting at a table talking to the general counsel for SpaceX who worked in the DC office. And he's like a very dry individual who I love. He'll know who he is. And I'm sitting in a chair, and the back of the chair wasn't locked. So I kind of like leaned back a little bit, and all of a sudden it just kind of like went totally horizontal. And so I was like, oh my God, this is super awkward. I'm like reclining in an interview. And so I kind of popped back forward. Well, then the chair just like popped out from underneath me, shot across the room. And now I'm like grabbing the table with my hands, like in like a pinch. And my feet are under the table. So I'm like, if I let go of the table, I'm either going to pull the table over top of me or I'm going to fall backwards. And I remember after that scenario of trying to get my feet back under me, he looks at me and he's like, this happens all the time. And he takes the chair I was sitting in, which was perfectly fine, and like shoves it out the door as though the chair was bad. And I'm like, they're never going to call me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's one way to demonstrate agility, flexibility.
I don't know if
maybe.
that's how he would remember it.
Okay, but so do you remember getting the call?
Yeah, the interview process at SpaceX was actually very protracted and drawn out. So I remember like somewhere around interview 5, it was just like, I'm never going to get hired. And I just became okay with that. Like, I'm never going to get hired, never going to be offered a job. So it was kind of like I'd already accepted that I wasn't going to SpaceX. And then like a month later, they would just randomly call and you go for interview 6, interview 7, interview 8. I think I did 8 rounds, which is more than I put people through, I think, when I was hiring. So maybe they were still trying to make up their mind about this rando from Georgia. But ended up being offered the position, and it was like at a management level lower than what I had applied for, which was kind of a super gut-wrenching kick. And I actually thought about not taking the job, and my good friend was like, what are you doing? Just go do it.
Good advice.
Great advice. So it was just superb advice. So I went in and did my best, and turned out my best was a lot. So built out the Starshield program, worked on getting mobility into Starlink, which wasn't originally going to have it. And that caused just tremendous amounts of friction with the engineering team, because it was obviously adding like complexity to an already incredibly complex system. But I was in charge of like building out the like government use cases, and in government, you don't want SATCOM to a thing that's fixed. You could just trench fiber to that building if that was the case.
Yeah.
You want it to be mobile. And so worked on that very early on to like do demos with the Air Force and with others that were like tremendously successful, both I think for SpaceX financially, but also just from a capability to the country. Huge success.
You're known for both being sort of a builder, someone who is great at working with government, and also a leader. Was there an experience or a type of work that you were doing at SpaceX where you felt most sort of in flow or sort of the happiest?
I think there were several like kind of like awesome parts about SpaceX, and one of them was, I mean, originally when it was like, hey, go build out this business for SpaceX that doesn't exist, it was just me. It was like literally just me working on it. And then I was paired with one individual from the engineering team who would tolerate my questions. And people would be like, why is this like manager from DC calling me and trying to do blank? And you had like full authority to just like go make it happen. And so it was really just a really cool opportunity to set the original direction and build out what it would look like. And man, oh man, did it come together in like a way that like, I feel like SpaceX has achieved something so incredible for the country and our allies. It's like, it's truly still hard to kind of like express how amazing this is, but it was like a capability that had been talked about for decades as like needed, and then nobody had ever done it because it was going to cost way too much and take way too long and probably be canceled. And I think that SpaceX was an environment that allowed that to happen and is now currently delivering tremendous gains. And it's something that I think even now with running Castelion, I'm so incredibly proud of like what we achieved at SpaceX. And I think about it, and even when I talk to like some of my former government customers, like they'll give me an update. It's just like, it just makes me happy to see where it's gone.
There are lots of folks who have stayed at SpaceX for 10 plus years who can still have that sense of agency and autonomy and feeling of reward in the company, given that the company's working on so much. And so maybe unlike sort of larger corporations that potentially sort of stagnate in some way, it does feel as though SpaceX is a place where you're able to consistently drive the outcome and sort of innovate. So what was it for you where you decided actually, it was time for something new?
Again, like the whole reason I got into like a sales kind of oriented job was to drive the direction of what we were building to get the outcome. It was always the outcome that I cared about the mission. And I originally, like at the start of SpaceX, right, like I had free reign to kind of go and drive that. And then as we started solving some of those things that were the most aligned with the SpaceX mission, we were moving into things that were arguably aligned with, like the mission of getting to Mars. And, it wasn't that it was ever, Elon never hid the fact that like his primary goal was like making humans multiplanetary and getting humans to the stars. So it really came down to, I had a strong belief in the mission that we were trying to achieve and like what we're going to do for the future of achieving better deterrence for the United States, keep America safe, keep our allies safe. And it became obvious to me that the best way to do that, after asking if SpaceX would be willing to do those next steps and getting a no, it made sense for me to leave, to go do that. Even though I was like extremely happy at SpaceX and at this point had been promoted multiple times and was in a very good position. So like, frankly, it was I think most people would have been like, this is like a horrific financial decision. Why would you leave now? Because it's just like, as you hit your stride in a career and be like,
I think I asked it a little more elegantly than that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But it was like, I'm gonna leave, and we're just gonna roll the dice and see if this is gonna work. And quite frankly, like early on in Castelion, which I'm sure we'll talk about, because General Catalyst was one of the first groups that came to. It felt like I quit to become unemployed, so that was.
Interesting feeling.
A little nerve-wracking, but it obviously has worked out for the best. But it's always been about mission alignment.
What is Castelion? Let's start at the beginning.
Oh, and now we're talking.
Yeah.
So we built the company primarily to help the country achieve overmatch in non-nuclear deterrence, meaning that like the goal is like the thing that the aerospace industry is really getting behind on is defense manufacturing. And the way that we've been like going after that for decades has just been producing results that are overpriced, behind schedule. And that was fine when America was ahead by far. And that's not the case anymore. And other folks are catching up. And so we formed the company to really focus on bringing advanced hypersonic weapons at scale, affordable, to be able to achieve deterrence. And because, I mean, frankly, like I completely believe in peace through strength and that doctrine, like that it keeps you safe if somebody knows that if you mess with America, then it's going to be a bad day. And in certain scenarios, in certain instances, right now, we were losing that capability to project force back. And in my mind, that was going to lead to worse outcomes. And having two small children, I just want to leave them like as safe a world as I had the benefit of growing up in, which is maybe a super awkward thing for somebody that builds munitions to say, but I truly, I mean, I just wish the world was like a great place. We could all just get along, but I don't think that's realistic. And I think that in a world where that's not realistic, then the best outcome is that America has, unapologetic strength.
Since we've known each other, which is well before General Catalyst invested, peace through strength has been a common language that you've used sort of throughout the years consistently. Why do you think hypersonics are, or what makes hypersonics such a deterrent capability?
So it's really the combination of three things. They go fast, they go far, and they're survivable, meaning that the weapon survives to the target. It's all about the ability to project force at a distance. And so speed matters because most of our adversaries have known for decades that we have these really great weapons, tomahawks. If you build like some kind of missile battery and it's fixed, like we'll just send a tomahawk and erase it in an hour and a half. And so they built most of their weapons on mobile platforms. And so if you want to actually be able to reach out and get to that target, you have to get there quickly before they drive it off and go somewhere else. So fast is important. Distance is important. So hypersonics fly at a very high altitude, and so they just have like low aerodynamic drag. And then they're very hard to hit because of the altitude and the speed at which they're going. So that combination makes it, frankly, like the perfect deterrent.
Is there a reason? I mean, you and I have talked about this a bunch, but as we think about the timing of the company, the timing of the need to create a new stockpile of hypersonic missiles, to think through how we can sort of create a hypersonic capability at scale and affordably, how do you know, there's a lot of noise and a lot of narrative out there, especially on Twitter. Like, this is a company you're dedicating your life to. Why? What is the why now for you?
I mean, it gets back to that original sense of purpose and mission, which is like, I want to leave a safer America for my kids. The problem of like, why hypersonics, why now, frankly, like has been self-evident for an extremely long time. I think the things that have changed, even like since we started the business, obviously like AI is incredibly hot, but so is defense. Even in 2022, I wouldn't have said defense is hot.
Totally agree.
Yeah. It was horrific trying to raise initial funds. But the problem is self-evident. So if you have passion in something and you learn about it, you learn about the subject and you get deeply involved, like usually the thing that is obvious to go fix is very self-evident. And I think like if you're looking at starting a business, like for advice for other founders, you don't need like a gimmick or, something super clever.
Totally.
It's usually like just pick a problem that is so blatantly obvious that you feel like you could contribute to and go solve it. And if you solve that at scale, everything will fall in place. So like, for me, like hypersonics was always like an obvious answer to be able to put America back on top. And it has not been solved. It's like America's had hypersonic weapons. Like we started working on them first, frankly. And we've been working on them for decades.
Yeah.
And we have done, test flights that work great. The thing that we haven't solved was the cost of these systems and the scale. And if your objective is to, leave a safer America for future Americans, you have to solve cost and scale. You have to have enough of these systems that somebody else actually cares, and the country has to be able to afford to buy them. And if you look at like where hypersonic systems can like range from in cost, you're talking like 10 million to 50 million. I mean, in what world is hurling half an F-35 at somebody and an effective solution to deter them? It's not. And so what we're going after is solving that problem of cost and scale while also achieving the capability that makes it desirable from a deterrence perspective. And so Blackbeard is our first hypersonic weapon. It's our first product, and that's exactly what it was built for. And frankly, like our whole like methodology of like, how did we design that? My earliest days after we started the business was literally, I went to, there's groups within the government that run these highly complex physics-based simulations of here's what we believe the other side has, here's what we have, and they model like shooting missiles, planes flying here, refueling, logistics, they model everything. And I just went to them and asked, like, hypothetically, if we had this, like, how would it do in that simulation? And like, or would you say you want more of like X capability or Y capability? And I just asked them, like, where would you start? Like, what do you think moves the needle if the goal is deterrence? And we got early feedback of what that was from like a speed, a range, et cetera. And then what quantity needed to be able to be fielded for it to matter. And that helps set like initial targets of like, well, then I'll go talk to these customer groups to figure that out. And so now we're working on, I won't say like the most capable hypersonic weapon system, but by far going to have the largest effect because we are solving cost and scale. And in some regards, the reason like I hesitate when I say that answer, it's like, yes, it's really cool if like you have this like really niche capability in your system, but it's also really cool if you can build a lot of them and it's affordable. Like, that's its own like miracle of engineering, and that's what we're working on.
How did you think through what to vertically integrate, what to apply from the SpaceX playbook, what to sort of defer from how manufacturing was done at the company? Sort of how did you think through what to vertically integrate?
I think people misunderstand what the SpaceX playbook is at times. Like, obviously, like the outside narrative is very heavily focused on vertical integration. My takeaway from working there was, if you can find anybody who could build this better than you can at a reasonable cost, who's reliable, then you buy it from them. It just turns out that in a lot of cases, that's not an aerospace supply chain company, because a lot of the practices that they have been either willfully adopted or been forced upon them by their other customers have destroyed their ability to be nimble, destroyed their ability to meet cost and quantity. And so you look outside of that. And so for us, I mean, I honestly wish we could buy more of Blackbeard from a supplier, like, buy subsystem, like whether it's IMU, flight computer, whatever, but they just don't exist. So in what we do every time is we make a make buy decision, but I'm willing to open the aperture to non-traditional sources, at least non-traditional from aerospace. So we'll go look at automotive supply chain. We'll go look at oil and gas. We'll go look at manufacturing techniques that are not normally used in the manufacturing of weapon systems. And maybe we take in some of that, but not all of it. But it always comes down to, if somebody is really good at manufacturing or building something, it's really arrogant to think that you as a new company are going to come in and somehow do it better. And so we're always just trying to find the group that is better at making something than us. And then if they can convince us they can do it on a reasonable schedule and be reliable, like, they have our business.
Do you think that just from your vantage point, that the sort of American industrial base or supply base dedicated to aerospace and defense, we can ignore sort of automotive for a second, but in the years of building Castelion, has that supply base improved or has it relatively stayed the same?
I think in aerospace, companies like SpaceX have notably made it better. Now that, again, they're a small fraction of the overall industry and market. And so there's like a lot of room to go, which is why I think you're seeing such interest in this like concept of like reindustrialization. Because there, in kind of all industries, not even counting just aerospace, there's been a huge push from a financial perspective, right, to offshore manufacturing. And then everybody assumed that everything would go smoothly. And then all of a sudden there's like, oh, for whatever reason, geopolitical, whatever, it's not going to be as reliable anymore to do that. And now everybody's like, well, how do I bring it back, but not have the end product cost, huge percentages more than it already does, because that'll hurt our market share. So I think that, SpaceX existing moved the needle, but I still think there's so many legacy processes still within aerospace that and those suppliers have almost been burdened with all these processes that the like AS9100 and these other processes that are forced upon them. they typically don't even have a commercial like arm anymore where they serve like commercial industries where you'd have very different kind of like goals and practices. And in some instances, that's like they're just responding to the incentives that they have. On the other side, though, they're not competitive anymore to a more commercial, business. And I think like the thing that has shifted in aerospace for sure over, the past 40 years is it used to be an aerospace company would build like TV sets and then also make components for a weapon system. And you don't see that anymore. I mean, short of Boeing, like most of the companies like don't have a major like commercial practice. And I think we have to, I don't know if that we're necessarily going to go back to the way it was where like there's a bunch of commercial companies like building like defense systems, but I do think that the systems engineering and approach of aerospace needs to start to align more with what good commercial practice looks like versus the other way around, which is where it's definitely landed as of today.
I feel like we could talk about this topic forever.
It would be long.
I want to stay on Blackbeard and sort of the future product vision of Castelion. So on Blackbeard, maybe talk through just a little bit around what is the type of pull you're seeing from the government on the product. And then Castelion has been in the news recently and quite a lot. And then zooming out, just as you think about what Blackbeard enables you to build next, sort of how do you think about that 5-year or even 10-year product vision for the business?
Yeah, so this is going to be a good question, Alexa. You ask questions that I sometimes don't want to give up for commercial reasons, and sometimes I just can't talk about because my customer would be displeased. But let's see what we can do.
Whatever you can share.
Whatever I could share. So getting back to the mission again, or like the ultimate goal was like, how does America achieve deterrence? Having a fantastic, affordable, scalable weapon is great. You're not going to just shoot it from like the coastline of or hopefully you're not going to be shooting it from like the coastline of California. So you got to look at like, how will it be employed? What will it go on? And so from the very early days of Castelion, we focused on like that bigger picture of like, if this is going to make an impact, we have to get on the platforms that the country currently employs. And it has nothing to say that like there's not room for improvement in those platforms. But if we're going to fight, in the next 10 years, this is what we have.
Yeah.
And so we focused, across all services of like, what would those platforms be? And so publicly announced, we're working with the Army on integrating in the HIMARS and MLRS, which are like the two mainstay platforms that we have for like, rocket artillery in the U.S. Army. And then on the Navy side, they operate F-18, F-35, but they have the most F-18s. And so trust me when I say that making a carrier-based air-launched weapon is not the short putt to getting a product over the line, but it was what matters, and it was the right decision. And so it is a very gnarly, hard problem, especially since very uniquely different with Blackbeard than I'd say most weapon systems. We're using the same weapon for this ground launch configuration with the Army and an air launch carrier-based weapon with the Navy. And that takes a lot of work to make that at all similar. Because you can just imagine that when you come off the wing of an airplane going, almost Mach 1 at release, you get a lot of aerodynamic control. And then you have the Army where you have basically a pod that is only as long as the weapon is long, and you're coming out of that with almost no airspeed whatsoever. They're like vastly different technical challenges to make something similar, but we are doing that because of how important it is to, if you want to achieve, again, scale and cost, there needs to be commonality. And our whole business model is, I want to make money by actually delivering the weapons that deter, not selling a development program. And so we have worked very hard to have a common round that is going to go serve vastly different purposes. Obviously that, those are just the two initial platforms. We do not have our sights on only those two platforms. I can't announce anything else, but the vision of like what Castelion is trying to do is, I want to leave a safer America. I think the first step, like we're well on our path with Blackbeard, if you look at like what comes after that, obviously range is important. The longer the range, the better. And then if you look at like current events with what's occurring in like the Middle East, like we're running out of interceptors. And so an interceptor is a different technical challenge than an offensive system, but there's a lot of similarity. And so we're building the company to tackle whatever hard problem the country has in defense manufacturing. Want to be good at solving defense manufacturing challenges. And that need will change over time. And we will focus our attention on what matters. And I think as long as we are focused on the correct goal, you know, the workforce will show up because, I mean, engineers love hard technical challenges that matter. Like that is by far like our biggest, like, that's the biggest like opportunity we have to recruit a great engineer is like, I'm going to let you work on something extremely difficult, but it really matters. And then to explain to them why it matters. And I think as long as we're doing that, we're going to have the workforce and we're also going to have the funding because like if it's a critical importance to the country, the country is going to put money towards it. And so I think that the thesis of where we started with being very narrowly focused has been proven quite successful, at least thus far.
I remember, I think it was several years ago, you mentioning to me that the purpose was to be able to build that the purpose was to build critical products that solve really difficult problems that continue to earn you the right to build more products. And there is that sort of manufacturing and R&D flywheel that you're building at Castelion. I want to talk about team.
Sure.
I want to first talk about your two co-founders. So tell me a little bit about them. Like, how did you guys, what was it about them that kind of brought you guys together?
So,
besides the amazing chemistry.
We do have very good chemistry.
You do.
We're very different people. I think from an outsider's perspective, it'd be kind of like humorous just to watch.
It is hilarious. It's wonderful to spend time with you three because you are so different, but each person brings such a sort of unique superpower, lens, tone, personality. It's like fascinating.
Well, obviously we all met at SpaceX through different capacities. I think like the funny thing at SpaceX, there's 2 vest dates every year. It's May and November 15th. And as you approach May or November 15th, everybody talks about, what are you doing? And then you're like, I don't know, what are you doing? And so...
Just WYD over text.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
What are you doing?
Yeah.
You going for another 6? Or are you thinking of something else? And, you know, I had already made up my mind that I was going to build Castelion, formerly known as Palace Industries. Because that was like, again, it's all about the end mission for me. Andrew was already had a job, I think, at oh goodness, the company now known as Longwall. He had a job at APL. He had an offer for ABL, and Sean was going to leave SpaceX because his supervisor was going to start a venture firm, which actually didn't end up happening right then. So everybody was already leaving, and so I told them what I was going to go do, and eventually they both decided that instead of doing what they were planning to leave and go do, they were going to come do this with me, which was great. Because like, I think if I ever had any advice, like being a solo founder would be exceptionally miserable experience.
How would you describe both of them in one word?
So I'm kind of the eternal optimist.
Okay.
Risk taker. Sean is a pessimist. And Andrew, frugal.
It's good to be frugal as the CFO.
Frugal with a love of plaid. It's like Al Borland. Is Al Borland with a spreadsheet. But he's like in between, both on but there's more. Like it's like you couldn't sum it up in one word, because like honestly, Sean is like amazing EQ and reading people. Because I think everybody like judges how other people would respond by like how would you respond, and that's how you just think other people think.
Yep.
The only thing I know in life is that the way I think about things is like so far off of how other people think that I am not a good barometer for that. Sean is exceptionally good at that.
Yeah.
And in fact, and Sean has a superpower of he'll tell you what you need to hear, and he's no matter how uncomfortable it is for him or for you.
Yeah.
And frankly, like when you do a startup, you need somebody like that. Whereas Andrew is willing to persevere through literally anything to get like output done. And it doesn't hurt that he also like he's professionally trained in finance, which I know people like normally don't bring in like a finance person until a little bit later in a startup, but when you do business with the government, you have to have that almost like out of the gate, which of course I knew, because you have to do these extremely complex proposals where you show all of your costs, et cetera, et cetera. And if you don't have maturity in those models that you show the government, they're just going to ignore you.
You missed one of Andrew's like side superpowers, which is being an exceptional tour guide. And
he's really good.
He's really good, and he's very engaging, and you learn a lot.
He's also I think he's taken 1, maybe 2 days off since the company started. One of those was to attend a Civil War conference. So
we love him.
We love him.
You've been able to grow the team very quickly. You obviously have a range of superpowers at the top. What are the qualities that make someone successful at Castelion?
It's really a bias to action and a call to the mission. It can have like someone's personal flavor on it. Like, they could have different reasons for why they think this is important, but fundamentally building a startup is just chewing glass on a daily basis. And if you're just there for the money or because you want like more title clout, like you're not going to make it, and you're not going to grow the culture in the way that I think is valuable. And I think for like, as I said earlier, if you want like great engineering talent, you're going to give them a really hard problem, but you're going to tell them why it is so important that they solve it. And not only just solve it in a way that it works, but solve it in a way that it works, it's affordable to build, and we can build a lot of them. That's super like inspiring, I think, for everyone. Like I get the small amount of times I'm allowed to go touch hardware or do something meaningful versus answering emails and spreadsheets and other crap. It's like some of my best times at the company.
Why does someone, maybe just to put a finer point on it, why does someone join Castelion today versus choosing another company that is maybe of similar scale, also mission driven? What do you find is the common reason or the sort of way to really lock down the best?
I think it comes back to like the culture of like, you're going to own this, and by owning it, like we really mean owning it. Yeah. You're going to get the resources you need, you're going to have the authority to get it done, and then you're going to be accountable to the outcome. Like that, I think companies sometimes say those things, but then don't really put it in practice. And so as part of the interview process, we always make sure that they get a chance to talk to other engineers so they can ask them like on an engineer to engineer level, hey, is this real? Like, will I really be allowed to run? I think if you're surrounded by folks that like have experienced that, and that the company actually is doing what it says, it goes a long way. And then of course, like, rockets are cool. Who doesn't like that?
What is the vision for the facility, and what is the vision for New Mexico?
So obviously, as part of our like previous Series B raise, we are deploying enormous amounts of private capital to build the world's largest hypersonics manufacturing facility that is going to be complete at the end of this year. So hundreds of millions of dollars, hundreds of workers, 1,000 acres. It's going to produce thousands of Blackbeards per shift, and you can run 3 shifts a day. So like we are aiming to enter production in 2027. And again, getting back to like the mission of the company is to produce scaled deterrence. our actions at the factory are exactly aligned with that. And so New Mexico has been an awesome partner for us to work with because they saw the same urgency, and they made sure that they helped us get in touch with the right folks to get the permits. Because it's just like when with a large construction project, there are so many things that have to come together in like this delicate, perfectly timed dance, and the state and county and the city have made that possible, as well as your capital. So thank you.
Anytime. Feel very lucky to be able to work with you.
Well, thanks for having me.